It had been 2 decades for Wizards in card form to release maybe its most important villain in the game's entire history. At least next to Nicol Bolas, I don't think anyone would argue that Yawgmoth is maybe one of the most important characters in the lore. But what stands out the most about Yawgmoth is not even so much Yawgmoth himself, but his creations. Where Nicol Bolas would probably mind control you to turn you against your allies, Yawgmoth's methods were quite cruel. You are more likely to be dissected, mutilated, destroyed, put back together, and turned against those you love. One of the first characters completed, who swore a lifetime loyalty after being healed from his stasis, Gix Yawgmoth Praetor finally gets his own card. Similarly to Yawgmoth, this is a name you've probably remember seeing a ton from Urza Saga, and just like Yawgmoth, he went a couple decades and change without ever receiving a card. With the Brothers War set coming out in November 2022, we are receiving a lot of nostalgia bait, and I would be lying if I said that this Gix Yawgmoth Praetor isn't everything I've ever wanted. You get a 3-mana mana cost in mono black, probably my favorite mono color, and he's a 3/3 reasonable stats for the mana cost, with a couple really good abilities. Whenever a creature deals combat damage to one of your opponents, its controller may pay 1 life. If they do, they draw a card, which is basically like an Edric Spymaster of Trest, but the black version. You have an activated ability of 7 mana and discard X cards to exile the top X cards of target opponent's library. You may play lands and cast spells from among the cards exiled that way without paying their mana costs. As many people have already pointed out, that is basically a villainous wealth that also requires you to discard your cards. What I like about this is that you have no doubt a powerful ability, but because you have to discard X cards, it's not straight up pay 7 mana, pay 7 more mana, and just keep doing this to an opponent, eventually winning that way. You do need an extra resource. You are giving up something else outside of the mana itself, which makes the potential to whiff on something like this much higher. Upside is totally there, but this could be the difference between winning the game and very easily handcuffing yourself for the remainder. I mean, just think about it. If you get mostly lands off of this and you discarded a hand filled with some things that were okay but not great, you're going to be left with an empty hand likely and very little off of this. So it is balanced while still offering you the potential of doing something that black is very good at, stealing your opponent's cards. What I would first like to include if I were to build this deck are great unblockable creatures, small, quick ways of getting that trigger so you can draw cards yourself. You are offering this to your opponents so they could draw cards if they want to, but the goal here is to, of course, benefit off of that ourselves. So things like Changeling Outcast and Tormented Soul that just can't be blocked are probably the most ideal options, and you also have Shadow, which is essentially the same thing, although it does offer your opponent's shadow creatures the ability to block them, so it's not pure unblockable, but it's just mostly. And getting the haste off of something like Nether Trader adds to the speed of the deck. Dothy Voidwalker is a versatile card that just happens to have Shadow, making any one of these a turn 1 or turn 2 play, and then turn 3 getting out Gix, I think is incredible. And there is more than just having a small unblockable creature. Focusing on good keywords like Menace, Flying, Haste, it's really going to take your deck to the next level. You get the payoff of Gix and drawing a card, with the added benefit of whatever these cards are providing you. Great keywords that offer your creatures pretty simple evasion. You want to combine that with great payoffs like Dranas and Dream Stealers, either helping your creatures out in combat or continue to punish your opponents. An ability that I really like is Myriad. I think it fits in perfectly with what this commander in Gix wants to do. Give any non-legendary creature of yours Myriad, and you have the potential of dealing combat damage to each one of your opponents, giving you the highest chance of drawing more cards off of Gix's trigger. We also get good keywords and payoffs off of equipment, so since this is going to be more of a combat-focused strategy, I can't see us not considering something like Whisper Silk Cloak. It'll make any of your creatures unblockable. Bloodthirsty Blade's going to be fun if you want to play more politics. Goad is just fun in general, but goading your opponent's creatures means that they're going to have to attack your other opponents. So they're going to lose a life and draw a card. They're going to be forced to participate. We get great payoffs off of Whisper Steel Dagger and Vorpal Sword. The potential to get a creature back from the graveyard with the dagger I think is cool. And since our deck is in a way going to be focusing on paying that activated ability for Gix, paying the activated ability for Vorpal Sword shouldn't be much harder. We can fit in a lot of good creatures with evasion too, so combine it with this, you can straight up start knocking players out of the game. What's a fun sub-theme that you could explore in the deck I think is Ninjutsu. While it's not going to be as powerful as if you had access to blue and other ways of providing your deck with ninjutsu, we do have some solid standouts like Inkai, Servant of Oni. Our deck is going to prioritize dealing combat damage, and as we first saw, we have shadow creatures, we have unblockable creatures that we can attack and have them not be blocked. We can return them back to our hand and throw out any one of these. Upside is that we're getting better creatures out there, and we can explore a different strategy if we want to in the future. But ultimately, we want the payoffs. We want to be rewarded for dealing combat damage. So something like Mindblade Render, even though it only benefits your warriors dealing combat damage, it does count itself. So you're getting card draw off of Gix, and you could potentially get card draw off of her. Grim Hireling gives us treasure tokens, Necropolis Regent gives our creatures +1/+1 counters, and Lord of the Void if it deals combat damage itself. We're following the stealing theme a bit. We exile the top 7 cards of that player's library and then put a creature card from among them onto the battlefield under our control. And there are a lot of great standouts that I think are going to be staples in this deck. Shadow Alley Denizen being one of them. Whenever another black creature enters the battlefield under your control, target creature gains Intimidate until end of turn. Parasitic Impetus follows the goat theme, and it's also potentially going to gain you back some of the life you're losing in the process. Triarch Stalker is from the 40k crossover. This is going to make it very easy for your opponents to gang up on each other. At the beginning of combat on your turn, you choose an opponent. Creatures attacking the last chosen player have Menace. So as you go around in turn order, the creatures that are attacking that same player are going to be more likely to connect, meaning everyone outside of that player is going to get more card draw. And Dread's been a standout in Commander for a long time. Wish it would get a reprint, but it's a solid defensive card, it's a solid combat card because it has fear. You're going to be attacking your opponents are going to want to attack you in return. A bit expensive on the 6 mana side, but I think it's worth it. The next thing we want to explore is how to offset or how to take advantage of losing life and drawing cards. Font of Agonies and Villas Broker of Blood have been pretty good ways of benefiting off of anything that will cost you life. Kyrix, Son of Yawgmoth, and Bolas' Citadel are ways of accelerating this. But I mean, if you're gonna play Villas, you should probably consider Bolas' Citadel or Kyrix, because it's just way too good to not. And of course, in any deck where you're losing life, you're going to want to gain that life back. Shoulder of the Apocalypse synergizes perfectly with Gix. To no one's surprise, I mean, she would synergize perfectly with any black commander that cared at all about drawing cards. Grey Merchant of Asphodel, Exsanguinate have been standouts in Commander for a long time, easily gaining you back one massive sum of life. And a Yara First of Lochthwain, assuming this is going to be more of a creature-focused deck, you're going to gain your life back a little bit at a time while also draining your opponents in the process. There are so many other ways of gaining life. We have Bantu's Monument, again, more of a creature-focused strategy, so you're probably going to benefit off of this more than anything else. Mask of Grizzlebrand is actually a pretty underrated equipment from last year's Midnight Hunt set. You can give your creatures good keywords flying and lifelink, so you have potential to gain back a ton of life through combat. And I highly encourage, if you're going to explore building around this commander, that you include ways of giving your creatures lifelink, like with Whip of Erebos. Venser's Journal is going to benefit us if we want to focus on filling our hand so that we can dump it with that activated ability of Gix, because at the beginning of each of our upkeeps before we do that, we will have a full hand and we will be gaining life for each card. And Alhamerit's Archive is just a good card to throw into any deck that cares about drawing cards or gaining back life. Another thing we want to focus on is actually being able to pay that cost for Gix's activated ability. We have plenty of ways of ramping in black, but a new card from the Warhammer 40k crossover, Scepter of Eternal Glory, is a 4-mana artifact that could potentially tap for 3 black as long as we have 3 lands with the same name. So mono black, we are likely to have 3 swamps out there. Black Mark gets great, it sits on the field, gets more charge counters on it, you get more black mana. And Cryptghast and Arcana Revenant are ways of doubling our mana. But without a doubt, if you want to take this seriously, you gotta go for Cabal Coffers and Nykthos Shrine to Nyx. These will provide you with pretty safe ways of gaining a ton of mana. It's a lot harder to deal with lands than most other permanents, so you can sit on these the whole game and then use all of it to dump into Gix's ability. Cabal Stronghold and Crypt of Agadim have potential to provide you with something similar, although these are a little bit less reliable. So that's going to do it for how to build around Gix Yawgmoth Praetor. Let me know what you think of the card in the comment section below. Let me know what you think of the Brothers War. So far it looks like a very interesting set, very much a throwback to the old Urza Saga storyline. Commander Void here signing off. I will see you all next time.